So today's video is going to be a true crime video, and today is the start of a brand new themed week on my channel. If you're new around here, every month on my channel I do a themed true crime week. So every single day for a week I will do a true crime video every single day, and they will all have a theme. And this month's theme is April abductions. But this case doesn't really fit the theme, and I'm sorry about that. This video was actually supposed to be up yesterday because my regular schedule is Wednesdays and Sundays for true crime videos. However, I didn't manage to get this video finished in time for yesterday, so it's going up today instead. So technically my themed week starts tomorrow and it will run until Monday. So normally it would run Monday to Sunday, but this time it's Tuesday to the following Monday. However, you're getting a video today, so it's technically like 8 days of true crime videos this week. So I'm making up for it a little bit. But yeah, make sure you subscribe to my channel if that sounds like something that you want to be involved in. Make sure you've got my notifications on so you never miss a video. And also, I just want to say that I would recommend following me on Twitter. It'll be on the screen right now. You don't have to, that's not me trying to say like follow me on Twitter. But if there's ever any problems during this week, if ever I'm going to upload later than usual, or if for some reason there's no video, which I'm hoping will not happen, but if that does have to happen, then that'll be where I'll let you guys know. I will tweet out about it. So if you do want updates, make sure you follow me on Twitter. That being said, today's video is a very, very requested case on my channel. I get requests to do this case on every single video I ever upload. So I know for a fact that this one is one that you guys have wanted to see for a long time. So today we are going to be talking about the Soham murders, aka the murders of Holly and Jessica. Before I get into this video, I just want to give my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone that I talk about in this video. This is all just information that I have found on the internet and I'm compiling into one video. So Jessica Amy Chapman was born on the 1st of September 1991 and Holly Marie Wells was born on the 4th of October 1991. And both girls were 10 years old and they were from Cambridgeshire in England. The two girls were best friends. They went to the same school, they did everything together. They lived really close to each other in a town called Soham in Cambridgeshire, which is why these murders are also known as the Soham murders. Both girls were huge Manchester United fans, Manchester United Football Club, and they both actually had matching Manchester United team shirts, which they just so happened to be wearing on the day when they went missing. The day the girls went missing was Sunday the 4th, 2002. They were at a family barbecue at Holly Wells's house and it was just a normal kind of summer day. Around 6:15 p.m. that day, the girls decided that they were going to walk to the local shop and buy some sweets, but they never actually told Holly's parents, or anyone for that matter, where they were going or that they were even leaving, and they would never return home. Around 8:30 p.m, Holly's parents realised that they hadn't seen or heard from the girls for a while, and so they decided to go up to Holly's bedroom just to check on them, see what was going on, and when they got there they weren't in Holly's room. So they searched the house, wondering where the girls were, and that was when they realised that they were missing. After searching the kind of local area like parks, playgrounds, places where they might have gone, they couldn't find them anywhere, and so Holly's parents phoned the police at 9:45 that night to report the girls as missing. So police responded right away, and the next morning the story was already on the news, where the girls were being described as white, 4'6"-ish and slim, and the photo that was used of both girls was one taken that day at the family barbecue, where they were both wearing those matching Manchester United shirts. Soham, the town where the girls lived, was a very tiny town, but it also had like a huge sense of community. Everyone knew each other, and so most people knew these girls that had gone missing, or at least knew their parents. And so when the news broke that these two little girls from Soham were missing, people volunteered in their hundreds. So many people wanted to help find these girls. 3 different police units were out searching for the girls among volunteers in their hundreds. It was already a huge investigation on the first day, and 24 hours after the girls' disappearance, the police made their first public appeal on the news.
Their disappearance is incredibly out of character. They haven't been missing before, very well balanced, very bright young girls. As far as we can tell, they've taken no change of clothing and no money. So as we say, it's quite out of character.
In Soham, the girls lived near a lot of kind of fields, meadows, wooded area type things, just big vast areas. And so the police's first kind of thought was maybe they'd gone on a walk, gone into one of these wooded areas or meadows, and just gotten lost and not been able to find their way back. Police tried to track Jessica Chapman's mobile phone, but it was 2002 and technology isn't like it is now, and so they couldn't really trace it to a specific area. They just kind of traced it to Soham in general. The day after the girls' disappearance, both of their parents made a public appeal on the news for the girls' return.
We love them so much, we just want them home. Just anyone who's got children must know what we're going through.
Holly and Jessica's primary school, St Andrew's Primary, was turned into a kind of investigation base, if you will. So like police could report back there because there were so many different units from so many different kind of areas. They could all report back to this school to either give information or receive information. Volunteers could go there for an update. It was a base. So a woman from a nearby village had reported seeing the two girls walking in front of her window on the morning after their disappearance. Someone else also reported seeing a suspicious white van 10 miles away from Soham, which was seized by police and searched, but neither of these two leads ever really brought anything back. On the 9th of August, it had been 5 days since the girls' disappearance and they still weren't found. And so a local sports centre was looking through their CCTV, seeing if there was anything on there, and sure enough, the girls had actually visited there on the day of their disappearance. So an immediate police theory was maybe the girls were meeting someone there, maybe they'd planned to meet someone that they'd met in an online chat room. But as quickly as this theory was made, it was also ruled out. A local taxi driver in the Soham area also came forward to say that he had seen a green car struggling with two children and driving erratically in Soham on the evening of the girls' disappearance. He said that this green car had driven into an estate in a town called Newmarket, and so the police believed that this was a pretty big lead, and so they made it public, putting it on the news and stuff. The night that that lead was made public, a man walking his dog just outside of Newmarket alerted police to 2 mounds of earth on the side of the road. Fearing that these 2 mounds of earth could be the girls in shallow graves, the police came out immediately to search these 2 mounds, but they found that they were just badger burrowings and there was absolutely no trace of the girls anywhere near. Meanwhile, police further up in the country came up with their own theory, that maybe the girls' disappearance was linked to an attempted abduction the year before. In 2001, a 6-year-old girl somehow managed to get away from her attacker, who was threatening to abduct her, threatening to kill her, and this guy was driving a green car and he was never caught. The same man was also believed to have been following a 12-year-old girl home one day, also in a green car, but this was never confirmed to have been the same man because obviously he wasn't identified ever, so you can't be sure that they were the same man, but green car, following little girls. On the 15th of August, 11 days after the girls' disappearance, Sky News did a segment where they retraced Holly and Jessica's steps on that day. As part of this, they interviewed the last person believed to have seen Holly and Jessica before their disappearance, a man named Ian Huntley. Ian Huntley was a caretaker at a local school, not Holly and Jessica's school, but one very close. However, he lived with his girlfriend, Maxine Carr, who did work at Holly and Jessica's school, and she was their teacher. Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr lived very close to the shop where the girls were going that day to buy some sweets, and Ian Huntley actually saw the girls.
6:15 p.m. The timeline on that Sunday night, the 4th of August, puts the girls here. We know they'd been to the sports centre just across the road a few minutes before to buy some sweets and were carrying on walking. How do we know they were here at 6:15? Well, we have an eyewitness. Ian Huntley here is a familiar figure.
Ian Huntley had come forward right at the beginning of the investigation, like as soon as he found out that these girls were missing. He came forward to police to say that he'd seen them leaving that shop at 6:15 p.m. that day.
I stood on the front doorstep grooming my dog down. She'd run away and come back a bit of a mess. They just came across and asked how Miss Carr was, as she used to teach them at St Andrews. I just said she weren't very good as she hadn't got the job. And they just says, please tell her that we're very sorry. and off the walked in the direction of the library over there.
And that was the last kind of definite sighting of Holly and Jessica before they supposedly left and set off back home.
You may, as it turned out, have been the last person to actually chat to them before they vanished.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
Maxine Carr, Ian Huntley's girlfriend, and Holly and Jessica's teacher also gave a TV interview.
They're ever so funny, they're brilliant, they're kind to everybody, and they love their families and everything, which is why nobody believes that they would ever run away. This is something I'll probably keep for the rest of my life, I think. It's what Holly gave me on the last day of term. She was very upset, and that's the kind of girl she was. She was just lovely, really lovely.
So Maxine's interview finished up and she went off home, and then one of the members of the crew that was interviewing Maxine noticed something weird about that interview.
My producer said, just play that tape again. I'm sure she was talking about the girls in the past tense.
They was very close to all their family, and that's the kind of girl she was.
We thought, that's strange, and that certainly got our alarm bells ringing.
Police then began thinking after this weird interview that maybe Maxine knew a little bit more than she was letting on. This, paired with her boyfriend Ian Huntley's weird, almost obsession with the case. He was always wanting to be interviewed both by police and like TV crews. He was always at the forefront of investigations. He was always out searching, and it all just seemed kind of weird. Ian Huntley didn't know these two girls. The time that he spoke to him on their way home from the shop was the only time he'd ever spoken to these girls. And so it was all just weird that he had this weird interest. Maxine was talking like this. It was all just kind of suspicious.
It's a commonplace now for the police to take an intense interest in bystanders and onlookers at crime scenes. It's true in arson, it's true in murder, that they always look at who volunteers to search for a body. Often, the perpetrator is among the searchers because they want to admire their own handiwork.
And on top of that, if that wasn't weird enough, he just was the last person to have ever seen them, so...
We were starting to think, wow, these two people really could be involved in something to do with these girls. They're close enough to it. They've clearly aroused police suspicion at this stage.
So on the 16th of August, 12 days after the girls' disappearance, Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr were taken to separate police stations for questioning. In that questioning, the two of them said that they were just home together that night, that they were just having a normal night, and somehow that was a good enough alibi to let them both go after 7 hours of questioning. That night, the Sky News reporter had found out that the two of them were in for questioning, and so when they got out, he called Maxine for an update.
What happened? How are you? She said, well, we're fine. I can't tell you anything about it, but it's all right. Huntley then grabbed the phone off her and, I guess, wanted to end the conversation quickly. The police have let us go, nothing going on. Thanks a lot. Thanks for ringing. Bye.
So before we get much further into the story, I just want to give you a little bit of background on Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr. Ian Huntley was born in Grimsby in England, just a little bit north of Soham, in 1974, making him 28 at the time. He had a pretty rough childhood. He was relentlessly bullied by children all the way through school, and he never really had any friends.
So I think this created a bit of a sense of shame in Ian Huntley, something that is often at the root of a lot of men like him in terms of what they go on to do. So he started off as somebody who was always the kid that was a bit odd, the odd one out, the one who's a bit of a loner.
In December of 1994, he met an 18-year-old girl called Claire Evans, and they had what can only be described as a whirlwind romance, and the two of them were married within 2 weeks of meeting each other.
His wife, Claire, quickly found that he had a terrible temper. She later claimed that she feared for her life and that he would often put his hands round her neck.
Claire quickly fell out of love with Ian and began seeing his younger brother Wayne. However, Ian refused to get a divorce from Claire until 1999, keeping her locked in for 5 years because he felt that if he stayed married to her, then this might prevent her relationship with his younger brother. Even though he didn't actually love her back anymore, He just didn't like the idea of her leaving him for his younger brother.
He'd always felt incredibly threatened by his younger brother. He took the attention away from him when he came into that family. And because of Ian Huntley's narcissistic tendencies, he's always going to feel he's being outdone by his brother.
In 1998, while still married to Claire, like I said, he was kind of over Claire, he just didn't want a divorce. In 1998, he met a 15-year-old girl named Katie and got her pregnant, which we'll actually come back to a bit later.
I think it would be fair to say that Huntley demonstrated throughout his adolescence and early manhood that he had an unhealthy appetite in younger and younger women.
Well, during his 20s, Ian Huntley preyed on a lot of young girls, underage girls, and the police thought that there were possibly up to 60.
In 1998, a 24-year-old Ian Huntley was charged with burglary and rape of an 18-year-old girl, which really damaged his reputation in the Lincolnshire area. This, among many other sexual assault allegations, I could find over 5 online. However, that one with the 18-year-old girl was the only one he was ever charged with. But if I can find 5 online easily with a quick Google search, you can imagine that there's possibly more, like either women that just never went to the police or ones that just never made it online. You can imagine that there's a lot. One of which included an 11-year-old girl that Ian Huntley admitted to sexually assaulting an 11-year-old girl. So all of this, all these allegations and now an actual charge was really damaging to his reputation. In 1999, Ian met 22-year-old Maxine Carr, and within just 4 weeks of seeing each other, Maxine moved into his flat. A year later, the two of them moved to Scunthorpe together, and it's believed that they did this to escape Ian's really bad reputation as a sexual predator in the area.
Maxine and Neale were a lovely couple. Maxine was any 25, 26-year-old girl, bubbly, giggling, talking about wanting to have children. She wanted to work in a nursery and get a job and everything. She was fantastic.
But it wasn't long before Ian Huntley's sexual predator reputation followed him to Scunthorpe.
I finished work at 8 o'clock at night, come home, and the next minute there was a police van outside in the back. Next day I saw Maxine. I says, "Are you all right? Is the family okay?" And everything like that. He says, "No, Ian's been accused of raping Grimsby." He says, "But the dates they've got, we were living next door here."
Before long, Marissa noticed that the two of them never really left the house. And she also noticed that Ian had some kind of very controlling behaviours.
I went round to see Maxine. Ian was at work. Basically, I had a cup of coffee, put it on the table, and next minute it was taken off the table, bleached, cleaned and put in the cupboard. And then she told me, no, Ian doesn't like to know that anybody's been in the house. So she was a bit scared of what was happening, and I was not allowed to tell him that I'd been in the house.
Huntley's controlling behaviours before long led to violent behaviours towards Maxine.
My sitting room goes, you could see straight into their kitchen, and he was shouting at her, calling all the names of son. "You does your told, you do what I tell you to do." You see her crouching in the corner where he was hitting her. "You listen to me, you do what I say, you don't listen to nobody else."
In 2001, the couple then moved again to Soham, where they remained until this whole thing happened. Maxine got a job at a primary school, Holly and Jessica's primary school, and Ian Huntley got a job at a local college as a caretaker. So anyway, back to the timeline. Maxine and Ian have been in for questioning and they have been released after 7 hours. But something in Ian's questioning must have seemed a little bit off, because this sparked a police investigation of both his house and his workplace. On the 17th of August, almost 2 weeks after the girl's disappearance, the police found some pretty incriminating evidence against Ian Huntley at the school that he worked at. Inside one of the bins, the police found the burnt remains of the girls' football shirts, tracksuit bottoms, shoes and underwear, which were all easily identified as theirs.
One of the crucial items in this particular case was the tops that the little girls were last seen in. These were unusual, and this helped us tremendously to build up a picture of the types of fibres that it would be easy for us to find.
So now the clothes had to be linked to Ian Huntley specifically, because even though they were found in the bins at the school that he worked, it didn't necessarily mean that he'd done it.
During the examination of the items from the bin, I found 5 human head hairs. These head hairs were compared with Holly's hair and Jessica's hair. They didn't match either of those two, but they did match Ian Huntley's hair.
And this was evidence enough for police to arrest Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr on suspicion of murder. Finally, in Maxine's second questioning, she admitted to lying in her first questioning about where she was on the day of the girl's disappearance. She'd previously said that her and Ian were at home together that night, they were having a normal night, but now she said that she was actually 110 miles north of Soham in Grimsby, which could actually be confirmed. So she was 110 miles away at the time of the girl's disappearance, but this now left Ian without an alibi.
In the last few hours, a 28-year-old man and a 25-year-old woman have been arrested. The 28-year-old man has been arrested for the murder and abduction of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman.
Later that same day, 13 days after the girl's disappearance, some burnt human remains were found over 30 miles from Soham in Suffolk. The next day, the police took to the news to update the public. The public that had spent the last 2 weeks so emotionally invested in this case, like even if they hadn't been doing the volunteering and raising money for the searches and stuff, people were just so emotionally involved that these 2 young 10-year-old girls had gone missing.
It is with great sadness that I have to tell you the following news. It may be some days yet before we are able to positively identify the 2 bodies found at Common Drove. We are certain, as we possibly can be tonight, that they are those of Holly and Jessica.
So immediately forensic experts were called in to recover the bodies and to kind of search the area that they were found.
A team of experts, including me, went to the ditch and we found that it was the bodies of 2 little girls.
There were a few items alongside the bodies that could pretty much identify them as Holly and Jessica before the kind of forensic searches even needed to be done.
We found part of the pocket of the tracksuit bottoms that one of them was wearing, part of the little plastic logo off the side of the tracksuit bottoms, and also a piece of jewellery which belonged to one of the 2 girls.
The girls' bodies were in such a state when they found them that they weren't going to really offer up much information as to how they died, when they died, stuff like that, but the place that they were found could have. Professional botanists were called in by police to try and help make sense of the crime scene.
It was obvious to me because a lot of the nettles had gone through corrective growth. They'd been flattened, but they'd grown up and corrected themselves. And so I said to the police, well, here it is. And
police investigated this kind of pathway of nettles and they found a strand of Jessica's hair attached to a twig. So now they knew the exact kind of way that Ian Huntley had accessed the ditch. They could search for evidence in that area a lot more accurately, easier, quicker. So now police had to somehow prove that it was Huntley that had taken the girls to this ditch, and so again they enlisted the help of botanical experts.
When I looked at the burnt clothing, it had masses of evidence that matched the vegetation in the ditch. All sorts of things embedded in the clothing that were from that ditch, and it showed that the girls were clothed when he put them in the ditch, so he must have taken the clothes off while they were in the ditch.
And obviously it pins it on Huntley for the girls' clothing to then be found 30 miles away at his workplace. Meanwhile, police continued the search of Huntley's home, and they found that recently his house and his car had been meticulously cleaned. Officers that interviewed Huntley in the days after the girl's disappearance had reported smelling a lemony cleaning product coming from the house.
Not only did we examine the carpets, upholstery and items within the house, but we were also given the contents of vacuum cleaners that Mr. Huntley had access to.
So when you use a vacuum, yes, it sucks everything up, but sometimes little tiny particles can sometimes come back out. And so when you're using a vacuum over a big area, it kind of distributes fibres and stuff in the whole area where the vacuum is used.
And so there wasn't just one particular location in which we found the fibres from the girls' clothing. They were found downstairs, upstairs, and in the bathroom as well.
But he hadn't just cleaned his house, he'd also meticulously cleaned his car and changed the tyres.
What he forgot was that the chassis had picked up soil. The chunks of soil had the same profile as where he'd put the girls.
In April of 2003, Ian Huntley pled not guilty to his murder charges, which meant that another court date had to be scheduled for November that year to do like a full trial, since he wasn't gonna admit to it. Here, Ian Huntley was charged with the murders of Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells, and Maxine Carr was charged with perverting the course of justice for her original fake alibi and also for assisting an offender, because it was believed at this point that she had actually helped with the cleanup efforts. All of which, like all the charges, both of them pled not guilty to. Ian maintained that he had absolutely nothing to do with these girls' murders or deaths in general the whole time, up until a month before his hearing. He was now admitting that yes, the girls did die in his house that day, but it wasn't murder, and he just kind of panicked and hid the bodies because he was scared. In his hearing, he went into further detail, saying that the girls were walking back from the shop and Holly was having a nosebleed, and so he let them come into his house while they were sorting out Holly's nosebleed. So the three of them were in Ian Huntley's bathroom, they were sorting out Holly's nosebleed, and then accidentally Ian Huntley knocked Holly Wells into the bath and she drowned. He then went on to say that Jessica Chapman, having just witnessed her best friend drown in the bath, she started screaming, and so he didn't want Jessica to alert the neighbours to what had just happened, and so he put his hand over her mouth to try and calm her down and subsequently suffocated her by accident. It came out in the trial that just before the girls' murders, Ian Huntley had actually had an argument on the phone with Maxine Carr because he believed that she was cheating on him. It's theorised that after this phone call, Ian put the phone down, he was very angry, and then he saw these two 10-year-old girls walking home from the shop, and so he lured them into his house and took out his anger on these girls, killing them. Although all of this is theory, and still to this day no one truly knows how or why those girls had to die, and Ian is still sticking to this accident narrative. In December of 2003, Maxine Carr admitted in court to lying in her original questioning with police, saying that she was at home with Ian that day when in fact she was 110 miles away in Grimsby. It's easy to prove that even if these murders were an accident, which is what Ian says, but people don't believe that. Like, the majority of people that hear this case don't believe it was an accident. But even if they were an accident, it's easy to prove that Ian knew that it was wrong and he tried to cover it up, and he tried to dump the bodies and burn them and just take his name from that, instead of just admitting to it, calling the police, saying these two girls have just accidentally died in my house.
We had a large number of transfers of fibres. We had fibres transferred from Mr. Huntley's clothing and his home to the tracksuit bottoms. We had hairs from Mr. Huntley transferred to the items of clothing of the girls. And in total, we had 154 transfers.
Finally, on December 17th of 2003, the courts found Ian Huntley guilty of both counts of murder. He was given 2 life sentences and his minimum was set to 40 years in prison, although people believe that Ian Huntley is never gonna get out of prison. It was revealed after Ian's sentencing that during the trial he actually faked a mental illness to try and hopefully get a lower sentence. He would dribble out of his mouth as he was talking, he would answer questions weirdly, just talk kind of weirdly in the hopes that people might think he was mentally ill, and he was actually sectioned under the Mental Health Act. While he was sectioned, he was obviously tested for all these mental illnesses, and the hospital found absolutely no evidence that Ian Huntley was mentally ill at all. And police actually got in touch with one of his ex-girlfriends who confirmed that he's actually done this before. When he was accused of those sexual assault allegations all those years ago, he again tried to fake having a mental illness, which is why he supposedly did it. and both times police just didn't believe it. So Maxine Carr was found guilty of perverting the course of justice, but not guilty of assisting an offender. The jury believed that she was not aware of the murders. She didn't know that Ian had committed these murders. She just lied to protect him because police were obviously very interested in him, but she believed that he was innocent, so she gave him this fake alibi just to get police off his back.
I think she's a victim as well, because I think if she said anything, he would have probably killed her as well, and that's probably why she kept quiet, because she was scared of her own life.
She was sentenced to 3.5 years, but was released after 1 year and 9 months, and she was also given a brand new identity. I believe this has only happened on 2 other occasions, like a brand new full identity. We talked about it in my Shannon Matthews video where Karen Matthews was given a new partial identity. So she would use Karen Matthews, her original identity, like in legal official things, but in public situations and when she's meeting new people, she'll use a new identity, and that's what they do a lot of the time with things like this. They really felt that Maxine Carr's safety was at risk, so they gave her a brand new identity, and like I said, up until then, I believe this had only happened twice before. Well, 3 times. Once with Mary Bell, who was a child killer, and once with James Bulger's killers, which I've actually done a video on. If you want to see it, I'll link it up there. But those were 2 10-year-old boys that killed a baby. And so they're only really given to, like, killers, like, really bad people. Whereas Maxine Carr was only in prison for perverting the course of justice. They really felt that her safety was going to be at risk because everyone hated Ian Huntley for this, and you can't blame him. But Maxine Carr didn't do it, but they still gave her a brand new identity. I just thought that was kind of interesting. On April the 3rd, 2004, the house where the girls were killed in, so Ian Huntley's house, was completely demolished and all of the kind of materials were disposed in secret locations. So after all this happened, a lot of investigation was done into the police work surrounding Ian Huntley. So like, for example, how he had over 5 different sexual assault allegations, some of which he admitted to, but he just was never charged. He was only ever charged with 1. They also looked into how it took police 2 whole weeks after the disappearance of 2 10-year-old girls to find out that a man with this many allegations was living so close to them. When young children go missing, they always check, like, if sex offenders live in the nearby area because those are immediate kind of suspects. And so for one man to have so many allegations and live so close to 2 missing 10-year-old girls, like, that needed a lot of investigation because that was really bad police work, and it turned out that it was the case as well. It was Ian Huntley. And another investigation was done into how a man with so many allegations could work in a school setting with a load of children. And yes, like I said, I understand that allegations are just allegations, and obviously he'd only been charged with 1, although he had admitted to a second one with that 11-year-old girl. And for that many different women to have allegations against one man in particular, from all over the country as well, in all these different places that he'd moved, there's got to be some level of truth to them. So like I said, Maxine Carr served just over 1.5 years of her 3.5-year sentence, and when she was released, she was granted lifelong anonymity, which cost anywhere between £1 million and £50 million. Since Maxine's release, at least a dozen women have reported getting attacked by people, just like strangers, believing that they are Maxine Carr. Maxine Carr now has a husband who has no idea who she is, and they also had a child together in 2011, which I have some strong opinions about. I don't like it. I don't like it at all that she was allowed to marry someone and have a child with them without them really truly knowing who she is, without them knowing her true identity and her past. For all we know, he could know. She might have told him in confidence, and he might know and have not told anyone, but the fact that he has had a child with someone, I just can't imagine having a child with someone. I said this in the James Bulger video, but imagine going on to get married to someone and having a child with them and then finding out that they are John Venables or Robert Thompson, and they've killed a child. I know it's not the same with Maxine, I know she didn't kill anyone, but I just don't like the idea of not knowing who the person that you are having a child with is. Anyway, moving on. Ian Huntley remains in prison to this day, and his life in prison is eventful, to say the least. In September of 2005, a fellow inmate called Mark Hobson, who was serving time for quadruple murder, he murdered 4 people through boiling water over Ian Huntley scalding him because he believed that Ian Huntley's crimes were disgusting. And that says a lot for a quadruple murderer to think that your crimes are disgusting. Like, child murderers and child molesters are always right at the bottom of the kind of pyramid in prison. And for a quadruple murderer to want to hurt you because of your crimes, that shows how hated Ian Huntley was in prison. Ian Huntley was actually rewarded £2,500 as compensation for this incident because it was found that it could have actually been prevented by prison guards, which... I'm mad. In September of 2006, Ian Huntley was found unconscious in his cell after taking his second reported overdose. He was taken to hospital for a few days to recover and he was fine and everything, but while he was there, the police kind of searched his cell to find like how he'd got this medication, what else he might have, and in there they found a tape with a recording on it. On this tape there was a Queen song at the beginning and a Meat Loaf song at the end, and in the middle, in between these two songs, was a kind of confession as to what he did to the girls and how he did it. In this confession, he sticks to his original claim that a lot of people don't believe, that Holly had a nosebleed and she fell in the bath and drowned, and Jessica screamed seeing this, and so he put his hand over her mouth and she suffocated subsequently. I'll link the full article down below that's got kind of snippets from the transcript. It was a very long tape, so nowhere has like the full everything that Ian said, but I'll link down below an article that's got a few different quotes from it and I'll just read you off a few now. It was believed that I disposed of Holly and Jessica on Sunday evening, the night that they died, but that wasn't the case. It was actually Monday morning, about 8:30 in the morning, that I took them to Lakenheath. They spent the night in the boot of my car. Holly fell into the bath. That was when Jessica started to cause a bit of commotion. She tried to, and this is where it varies from my testimony in court, she tried to use her mobile phone. I grabbed it from her and turned it off as she was constantly saying I'd pushed Holly. So now I'm going to paraphrase because this bit's quite long, but like I said, I'll link it down below so you can read further on it if you want to. Ian claims that he took Jessica downstairs and tried to explain to her that he didn't push Holly, that Holly just fell in the bath and drowned. But she didn't believe him, and anyway, he turned around during this kind of conversation they were having, and when he turned around, Jessica tried to get up and head towards the door to leave. So that was when he grabbed her so that she couldn't leave out of the house. She again started screaming because a man has just grabbed her, won't let her leave the house, and that was when he covered her mouth and suffocated her. Meanwhile, Holly was still upstairs in the bath, and at this point she wasn't actually dead, she was just in the bath from when she'd fallen. And by the time he'd managed to get back up to her, by the time Ian had finished suffocating Jessica and gone back up to Holly, it was too late to save Holly as well, and both of the girls were dead. He also claims on this tape that there was absolutely no sexual aspect to this crime, which was highly speculated at the time, although you can't believe anything that Ian Huntley says really, because he's got a past of lying, he's got a past of sexual assault allegations, some of which with an 11-year-old girl that he did admit to, and so I don't really know how much you can believe that. In 2010, Ian got into an altercation with another inmate who actually slashed Ian's throat, but he was taken straight to hospital and his injuries were not life-threatening, they weren't that bad. The inmate that did it was identified as armed robber Damien Fowkes, who actually went on to kill another convicted child killer after his attempt at Ian Huntley. So if you remember, like way at the beginning of the video, I told you that Ian Huntley, when he was in his 20s, he had a relationship with a 15-year-old girl called Katie. When Katie was 16 years old, she actually fell pregnant by a much older Ian Huntley, and she actually had a girl, meaning that double murderer Ian Huntley has a daughter.
His behaviour started changing fairly quickly, didn't it, towards you? You suffered terribly at the hands of Ian Huntley?
Yes, I did, yeah.
What did he do to you?
He beat me, physically and emotionally, and sexually abused me.
Even during Katie's pregnancy, Ian was abusive to her. He would try to push her down the stairs, he would punch her in the stomach, just really awful stuff. Katie's daughter is now in her 20s, I believe she's actually 20 years old. She's called Sammy, and she didn't actually know who her real dad was until she was 11 years old. Sammy actually found out that Ian Huntley was her father by accident and by herself while she was at school.
It wasn't the actual story that I was researching, it was the crime rates in my area, and when I put that into Google, the first thing that came up was the story. So I went onto that, no idea who he was or anything, and the first thing that came up was a picture of my mum and me.
All her life, Katie had told her daughter Sammy that her real dad was a bad man who did some awful things, and that's why they don't talk to him anymore. And Sammy just kind of accepted that. But when she saw this that day at school, everything just kind of fell in place in her head, and that was when she realised who her dad really was. But yeah, that completes this case. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a big thumbs up on the video. Subscribe down below if you want to be a part of the rest of this week. Videos every single day until Monday. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, just in case like anything ever goes wrong. Hopefully nothing will. Hopefully this week will go smoothly, but it's me. I mean, it's me. It's Eleanor Neale. But yeah, make sure you subscribed if that is something that you want to see. Make sure you've got my notifications turned on so you never miss a video. And yeah, let me know what you think of this case down below. I normally put my own kind of little thoughts in at the end, but this one I don't want to. I don't want to ever kind of put my own thoughts and opinions in the end of videos about children. I just think it's inappropriate and unnecessary. Although I have put in my own little opinions about Ian and Maxine as we've been going. So yeah, let me know what you think down below. So yeah, let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!
I got something. Hold up. We gon' function.